We're at National Theatre in the Paris Plaza. Now what I'm going to do, folks, is through the magic of radio, we're going to send it back to the studio where I happen to know Rocco Frangione has the one and only Ben Wicks with the fabulous interview, so I'm going to send it back to Rocco right now. Rock?
Thanks a lot, Andy, and you're right, I do have Ben Wicks with me. Mr. Wicks is here to speak about his latest book and calendar. The book is entitled So You Want to Be Prime Minister, and the calendar obviously is a 1985 calendar. Mr. Wicks, we were talking just a few minutes beforehand, and I detected in your voice a British accent telling me you're not from Canada.
No. Originally, I was right in the centre of London, just by London Bridge, as a matter of fact. The hospital, in fact, where I was born, was actually at the foot of the bridge. Yeah.
You haven't always been involved in writing and illustrating cartoons. In fact, you've had a varied career.
Yeah, I would say that. It's pretty varied. Yeah, I once counted up. I've had 32 jobs since I left school. I left school when I was 14 and went straight into the market, selling fruit and stuff like that. And I think that was my most valuable, as many people say, getting out and, I suppose, getting into the gutter and learning something. But certainly it paid me in good stead. I can remember the first day to this moment. The first day I got there on the barrow, the guy who actually owned the cart, he started advising me how to work, you know, and he said, look, there's one thing you have to remember. Don't give anyone oranges if they want apples, which is a very good selling piece of information. And the other thing he said is, now I'm going to tell you how to ring the change, which means how to shortchange a customer. He said, you never do it to a woman, always do it to a man. He said, because a woman is too sharp, he said, to be caught with short change. He said, but a man is too stupid. He said, and he'll always get caught. He always puts his, he said, he always gets his money out, and he never ever counts his change. And it's a bloody fact to this day. I still do that. I never count my change.
You might come out on the losing end.
Yeah, always. Yeah, I'm the one to do it.
Well, with 32 jobs, could you perhaps tell us what some of those jobs have been?
Yeah, let's see. I've been a clog maker, making clogs in a factory. I've been a wallet maker. I've been a woman's purse maker. I was a glider pilot during the war. I've been a musician. I've been a milkman. I've been a commercial artist. I've been a janitor, window cleaner. What else have I been? My God, it goes on and on and on. Oh, bricklayer's helper. I worked at a coffee shop thing at one time. So it just goes on. Everyone varied. But the interesting thing is that with the exception of one job when I was a shipping clerk, and I absolutely hated it, I've enjoyed all those jobs because the people I met on them were just fantastic.
Well, now, for the benefit of our audience, with 32 jobs to your credit, I know how old you are. Could you perhaps tell our listeners?
Oh, yeah, I'm 58, so... yeah,
quite young still.
Quite young still. Well, I sort of nip around a bit still.
That's almost 1 year per job.
Oh, is that how it works out? My God, I never thought of working out like that. It's frightening, actually.
Well, among the 32 jobs, you also had a brief career in television and journalism.
Yeah, right. I was a journalist. I've worked for both the London Sunday Times and the London Observer. I was a journalist. I covered the war in Biafra for the Los Angeles Times, the Australian elections. I was at the Manson trial, and a few other things. I just got back from Switzerland, where I was doing a story on the Swiss banking system, and I went to open up a numbered account just to find out what it's like. I mean, I didn't have any money, but pretended I was going to open up.
Did you find out what it is like?
Well, it was fun, really. I went to a little town called Interlaken, and I went in at 8 o'clock in the morning. The bank's open very early in Switzerland, and I said to the girl, I said, I'm here to open a numbered account, figuring that she'd be very impressed at this, figuring I was worth billions, you know. And she never blinked an eye. She said, oh, well, you'll want to see a Mr. whoever it was, a Mr. Fawkes or something. And she said, the third floor. I went up on the third floor, met this Mr. Fawkes, and kept my name secret to the very last. He said, what kind of amounts were you thinking of depositing with us, Mr. Wicks? And I said, a considerable amount. I figured that would really impress him. But none of them seemed to be impressed. So I think what it is that they have so many people who probably come in there from around the world, dropping in large amounts of money. For instance, during the course of actually researching the story, I found that the president of Zaire in Africa, they estimate has $4 billion, if you can believe it, in Swiss banks. I was told the president of Ethiopia, interestingly enough, Haile Selassie, Empress Haile Selassie, was at one time sending so much gold back to his Swiss accounts that they had to tell him to slow down. So it's an interesting story. Yes, it is ironic. You're quite right.
The open situation.
Yeah.
Is it with journalism then that you began to approach a career in writing on a full-time basis and on a permanent basis as well as drawing cartoons?
Yeah, well, that came about in a strange way, the cartooning aspect, because at the time I was a milkman. It's another job. And my wife at that time was a nurse. We were living in Calgary. We'd gone directly there.
So you had come into Canada by that point in time?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we came to Canada in 1957. Just my wife and I. We'd met just a year before. The Suez Crisis, as with so many others, had sort of upset us. We went straight to Calgary. I'm sorry to chop this around, but I was at the time an out-of-work musician. I'd been a professional musician. And my wife got a job immediately. She was a nurse. And the job I finally ended up with was a milkman, which meant I was home early in the afternoons. So I had nothing to do, and the wife said, well, you used to enjoy scribbling and stuff like that. Why don't you have a go at doing this cartooning business? So I got a book on cartooning and looked up the advice, how you do it. And in there, it had 2 pages of magazines that you sent to who took cartoons, who bought cartoons. And it started at the very top with the most important. It started with the Saturday Evening Post, the New Yorker magazine, and worked their way down. So I sent 6 cartoons, which they suggested was the number, to the Saturday Evening Post. And lo and behold, 5 weeks later, I had this incredible letter back from New York saying they wanted to buy my work, but since they'd never heard of me, they wanted 3 letters of reference, which took me about 5 minutes to write. I remember I put Reverend behind one of them, figuring that that'll impress them. And I drew for 2.5 years for them.
So you're telling me that you forged those letters of reference?
God, letters of reference. Letters of reference are easy to bloody do. I mean, they got to be. And you know the wonderful thing about reference letters that you write? They're so fabulous. They're so glowing. You know.
Well, with the Saturday Evening Post, then the 6 cartoons that you sent off to them, were they editorial in nature at the time?
No, they were humorous cartoons. They were sort of one-panel funny cartoons, like Herman and stuff like that. That's what they were. And it paid very well, actually. It paid better than I was getting as a milkman.
I'm sure it would.
Yeah.
So then that's how your career as a writer cartoonist began then?
Yeah, it really started like that. I began writing then a couple of years after doing the cartoons. The various newspapers started to buy the cartoons. I started to get into the political area, what I do now, in the news area of cartooning, and quickly found that the small cartoons I did, there was no one else doing it. So I had no competition at all, which is always a wonderful way to be. And suddenly found myself drawing for dozens of newspapers. And then one day the Toronto Telegram invited me to come to Toronto and sign a contract, which we did. By then we had 2 children. And we moved to Toronto, and that was it. It was the start.
Is Toronto home still now?
Yeah, Toronto is still home. We had a minor sort of 4-month break when we really felt that England was still our home and went back. But it obviously wasn't. It took us 4 months to find out, and then we went back to Canada.
Well, just then to get back to the political cartoons, your format, I note, is different than the regular cartoons that we'll see, in that you tell a story in one frame.
Right, yeah.
A man like Charles Schulz will tell a story in Peanuts in one strip, which lasts as much as 2 to 3 weeks at a time. In many senses, you're like Jim Unger, who is the creator of Herman.
That's right, yeah. It's very much the same as a Herman. The only difference is that since I deal with the news, and I draw for a couple of hundred newspapers. I have to draw a month ahead. So consequently, everything I draw, I have to read the wire service extremely carefully. I'm also, my major interest is the news, the development of news. So I have to see what's coming up in a month's time, and then I draw to that. And obviously, that's the most difficult part, is hitting the days when those cartoons will be relevant, which I have to do.
Well, why do you do the political cartoons?
Well, I've always been interested in the political aspects of things. I personally find it's interesting. And easier, really. You have a hook to get it on, you know, if you have a news item. Now, for instance, I find strip cartooning extremely difficult. I do a political strip as well. It's in 52 newspapers. I don't think it's here, but I find that very difficult. But strip cartooning, incidentally, is very, very interesting because of the fact that with a strip cartoon, for those of you who don't realize what we're speaking about, it's the one where you get a number of pictures in a line, like Peanuts. That, if you get 3 or 4 pictures, you're really looking at a 3 or 4 act play. It's a small play, in effect. The first act is the first picture, and then the last act is the ending of the strip. For that very reason, many of the world's leading movie directors are first and foremost cartoonists. And in fact, John Huston, the great Hollywood director, once said he would never allow anyone to direct a movie unless they'd taken a cartoonist course. Alfred Hitchcock was a very good cartoonist and never ever looked through the eyepiece of a camera. He drew hundreds of small pictures before he started the film, a storyboard, and then started the film. And the famous scene in Psycho, where the girl was getting stabbed in the shower, that was 72 little drawings that were drawn for those setups.
Almost done frame by frame, then.
Almost done frame by frame. And in fact, they're going back to that now. The movie, the Ark, or whatever it was, I forget what it was, the Search for the Golden Ark, or whatever.
Oh, Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Raiders of the Lost Ark. Raiders of the Lost Ark was, once again, that was done on storyboard. All those scenes that you saw in the beginning, the rolling stone down the tunnel, everything was drawn, and they say it saved them thousands of dollars, millions of dollars, in fact, because they knew exactly how they wanted to set up the cameras.
I see.
Mm.
To get back to the politics for a moment, I have to ask you about the creator of Doonesbury, Mr. Trudeau.
Yes, right.
He's been back in the news again lately with Doonesbury coming back to the newspaper strips, and of late he's been the object of some criticism from some newspapers who in fact have dropped the strip because of his attacks on President Reagan. Now, 2 questions. Have you ever met the man, and what do you think of the Doonesbury strip?
No, I've never met him. That's the first thing. 2, I personally, I mean, it's all a matter of personal feeling. I personally thought Doonesbury was much better. I'm disappointed to see it come back. It's because there is something about the characters for me that just don't fit into the modern idiom. I'm not agreeing with the newspapers who say that he attacked Reagan. He did. I mean, there's no question about that. You have to be fair about that. There was really a cartoon of Doonesbury's during this election period that didn't attack Reagan, and I think that's easy to do. It's very easy to do that. It's very easy to be a liberal cartoonist. You know, you can always attack wrong. It's to praise that's the tricky thing. That's the most difficult thing of all in cartoon.
Your political cartoons are much different. They're more of a humorous tone to them. You don't
They
attack anybody.
No, that's right. I think they're of a softer kind. They certainly don't. I enjoy that. What I try to do, I think, is I try to first of all I try to entertain, to draw people to the strip. Then I try to inform them of what's happening within it, so that it gives them some clue, you know.
Well, your new book then, so you want to be Prime Minister.
Yeah.
What gave you the idea to do it?
It's a very simple answer. I wish I had a complicated answer, but I was in the middle of a book called How to Protect Your Cat During a Nuclear Attack, which I thought was extremely important, and was told by McClellan and Stewart, stop that book. We have a word that the fall, this was in February, is going to be a big election period. We want you to tackle a humorous book on the election. and politics. So I said, okay. So I did this book on Prime Minister, and it occurred to me that certainly I did, and a lot of other people wanted to be Prime Minister. And I thought, isn't that wonderful? We now have 4 years to actually rehearse and practice up. And one of the great difficulties when you want to be a Prime Minister is that you don't understand the jargon. You haven't got the faintest idea what the bloody hell they're talking about. So this is a book set out in encyclopedic form. So it's A to Z. So, for instance, if I can give you a couple of examples, so you know what to answer and what the subject's about, you see. Acid rain. You quickly turn to acid rain, and you see that acid rain is something that kills the fish. Well, you're not for that, because this country is full of fishermen who would like to kill them themselves before the rain gets to them. Cruise missile under sea, you see, you find that the cruise missile is an incredible weapon that weaves its way through mountains before it hits the target. And for that reason, we test it on the prairies. So you find wonderful things like that, extremely useful things in the book. And it's been fun. And of course the calendar is the most successful thing of all this fall. We've sold 28,000 of these calendars, if you can believe it.
That's across Canada.
No, just in Toronto alone. It's just unbelievable. And I think it's taken off because they're so cheap. They're just $3.95, and well, I think they're cheap. But the next price in calendars is $6 and $7, you know.
And this isn't your first attempt at putting together a calendar.
No, I did a calendar last year for Boys and Girls Clubs that did very well. But I thought this year I'm going to do a calendar for Ben Wicks, and I must say I'm enjoying the sales no end.
Are there any more political books planned for yourself in the future?
Not really. I think I'm going to get back to protecting my cat during a nuclear attack. I'm very concerned about the fact that I'm only halfway through it, and the bomb could drop tomorrow, and I wouldn't know what the hell to do with the cat.
Well, it's a very critical situation, yes. Just a couple of last questions then. Yeah. When you do get an idea, where does it simply come from? Is it just simply right from the newspapers?
Not really. You get a feel for what is happening. Like this year, for instance, obviously this time of year is easy, you know. I mean, I can draw ahead of the game because I can draw all about Christmas. In fact, I've drawn up to the middle of January now. But in other times, you get the feel of the news, what's developing, and obviously something like Ethiopia is going to stay with us, or has done for a month. Unfortunately, it's only going to stay with us for another 2 weeks, and then everyone's going to forget about it. That's the tragedy.
Right. So now you are on your way then to the Algo Centre Mall for the autographing signing session.
Yeah.
And that's at 7 o'clock tonight then.
7 o'clock tonight I shall be signing calendars to whoever you want them signed to. For just $3.95 you'll get a calendar that says to Uncle Bill from Vera and Ben Wicks, or you can get the book So You Want to Be Prime Minister to Uncle Bill from Vera and Ben Wicks. I would mention one thing. When you buy the book, which is only $6.95, if you don't become Prime Minister, you can't get your money back.
That's a drawback.
Well, it is.
Ben Wicks, I'd like to thank you very much for dropping by our studios.
Well, I've enjoyed this really very much, Rocco. Just great. Thanks.
And much continued success in the future.
Thanks very much.
And now back to John Houston.